6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start the meeting. Our first item is our Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vice Chair, could you read our mission statement?
Marshall Public Schools. The mission of Marshall Public Schools is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I'll make a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Just a note on that we did add, I think, a pretty routine item. We have some obsolete technology equipment that we would like to have your permission to dispose of before it gets too snowy and we end up having the need for the space back in the storage area there. So we did add item 9.3, which is the authorization to dispose of obsolete equipment.
Okay. Note taken. Anything else to add to the agenda? Very good. Please vote. It is approved. Public forum. Is anybody in the public that would like to approach the board? Now is your time. Moving on to our presentation, our Truth in Taxation. Mr. Lamprecht, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm glad to see you all here on such a wintry night, and we'll move right along here on the Truth in Taxation hearing for 17, Pay 18. If you have any questions, by all means, fire away as we go along. So, this is something that we are obligated to do by state statute. We're supposed to hold this public meeting after the 24th of November and before the 28th of December, which we're doing here on December 4th. State law requires that we present information on the current year's budget and actual revenue and expenses from the prior year. Talk about the levy, the percentage change from the prior year, specific purposes and reasons why there's a change, and offer the public any opportunity to ask any questions that they might have. Here is our agenda. Basically, that's what I just went through. Public education is strong in Minnesota. Marshall's composite score on the ACT is 22.2. This slide here really shows a couple things. The MCA test results from 2017, which you've probably seen, compares ISD 413 with the state public school average in math, reading, and science. And then also compares with the state charter school average. And as you can see in math, Marshall is above the state public school average, above in reading, and also in science. And as an average, almost 3% above the state public school average, and much more in regards to comparing it with the state charter school average. And then the ACT results in the different areas: in math 22.7, English 20.7, reading 22.3, science 22.4, makes a composite score of 22.2. Again, comparing very favorably with the state average of 21.5 and the national average of 21.0. Any questions on that? But that's good news. We're doing a lot of things right here in Marshall Public Schools. The Constitution mandates that the legislature establish a general and uniform system of public schools, which in fact is in place. And the school district is highly regulated by the state. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about this evening really are set by the state of Minnesota, whether it's the Minnesota Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Revenue. We basically follow through on all the things that the state says that we have to do. And like I said previously, having a truth in taxation hearing is one of those things that we're obligated to, in fact do. One of the things that the state authorizes the school board is to levy up to $724 per pupil unit. 300 of that is board referendum, and 424 is local optional revenue, which we had talked about in the previous budget discussions. This slide's talking about the basic general education formula, and that it hasn't kept pace over the years since 2003, and we have a couple slides that will show that. For 2017 and 2018, the legislature approved a 2% increase. That translates into $121 per pupil unit for FY 2018 and $124 for FY 19. The per pupil allowance for FY 2019 would need to be increased by $596 to be able to have kept up with the pace of inflation over those years from 2003 to 2019. That translates in again to 9.4%. And here's the slide, and here's that $596 difference, 9.4%, in regards to the general education formula. And the next slide really shows, and this comes from the MREA, North Star Policy Institute, and really shows what has been taking place in regards to the three components: levy, total revenue, and state aid. You'll see in this chart that state aid is below the line, and that's not a good thing. It hasn't kept pace. Levy, in fact, has increased, and again, these amounts are all in constant 2018 dollars. And then taking the state aid and the levy, two lines together, that creates the blue line, which is our total revenue. We've had an increase from 2003 to 2019. Right here is that increase, not very significant over that long period of time. And again, most of it has come in the form of local levy rather than state aid, which has actually decreased, again, looking in terms of dollars that stay constant with the 2018 amounts. Any questions about that? And underfunding of special education has been another area that causes a drain on funding for the regular classroom. It's just been a component ever since I've been in the school business that special education just is not funded the way it needs to be funded. And all the programs that the Marshall School District has, we do a wonderful job in special education, but the funding isn't commensurate with all the programming, all the staffing that we do in fact have to deliver the services to our special needs students. And this is another thing I think that you're all familiar with in regards to it's not really growing dependence on referendum revenue, it is dependence on referendum revenue. In '93, 65% of the districts had referendum revenue averaging $332 per pupil unit. For 17-18, 331 of 331 Minnesota districts have referendum revenue and or local optional revenue authority averaging $1,296 per pupil unit. Every district has some type of referendum revenue, whether it's board approved or if it's local optional revenue. And that $1,296 right here, that's 20.5% of the general education formula allowance. So that's a pretty significant number looking at it or comparing it with the actual funding per pupil that we get, over 20%. That's big time. Again, we're looking at tonight, 2017, pay 2018, for taxes, which is for us the 2018-2019 school year, fiscal year 2019. Change in the tax levy does not really determine a change in the budget. There's just a lot of formulas. I think I've showed you this before, but this is the tax levy limitation report. It's now 39 pages of formulas and stuff. Most everything comes through the state, the Minnesota Department of Education. We have increases in tax levies that maybe are revenue neutral because it's offset by reductions in state aid. Again, most things are expenditure budget is limited by the state set revenue formulas, voter approved levies, and fund balance. And I'll just emphasize this, an increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an equal increase in the budget. And the school district is on a different levy cycle than what the city and county are. For the pay 2018 taxes, that is for the budget year 2018 for cities and counties. For schools, the 2018 tax levy is going to be for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, which ends in June of 2019. So there's a difference in the scheduling of the tax levy, at least how it's utilized between city and county and the school district. Only current year budget information, prior year actual financial results are to be presented at this hearing. That's what you're going to see. Our school district budget is divided up into separate funds. These 6 funds are the basic main funds that we have. The general being the major fund where most of the money, revenue, and expenditure flows in and flows out. So we're going to look at our budgets, the 16-17 actual numbers. This is audited numbers, 17-18 revised budget numbers. And then what the percent change is from actual to budget. And not a whole lot to talk about there on the revenue side, because that's what this slide is about, other than capital outlay, which is at a 19% increase. And a lot of that is because of long-term facilities maintenance, which is being ratcheted up now for the 3rd year, as far as what we get per pupil unit for long-term facilities maintenance. So that's why the increase in revenue on capital outlay. Expenditures, the same comparison, 16-17 actual with 17-18 revised budget. And then what the percent of change is. Just draw your attention to this one line item, capital outlay, really refiguring and configuring what we're doing between general fund and capital outlay fund as far as budgeting expenditures and long-term facilities maintenance. And the reason why there's such a significant change is this number here of $853,000. There was a lot of adjustments that were made from capital outlay fund during the audit process to the general fund. And so in some respects that's understated, and this number here, $1,628,000, is more accurate, more correct, especially with the additional long-term facilities maintenance funding that we're receiving and the projects that we have on the books for 17-18. Any questions? This pie chart just shows that the general fund is really, and this is revenue percent, 74% of our total revenue is in the general fund, followed by the debt redemption fund, debt service, community services, and then down the line food service and capital outlay. That's what's budgeted anyway. We'll spend a lot of time on this slide here and go through every line item. No, we're not going to do that. Really what the bottom line is, this is a report that after the audit has been completed that we need to publish both on our website and in the local newspaper, The Independent, and basically just shows all our different funds, what our starting balances were, what our revenues and expenditures were, and then what our ending fund balances were, and then that's for 16-17, and then looking at what we're budgeting for 17-18. And if you can see below, we finished the total amount, actual fund balance is $9,689,000 for 16-17, and we're looking at $9,540,000 for 17-18, based on the budget. General fund revenues by source. 82% of our funds come from, in essence, state aid, okay? And followed by property tax levies, what we're talking about, 9% at 9%, 6% for other local and county revenues, and then federal, 3%. And I've talked about this before, don't let me get on the soapbox, but they provide a lot of direction for us, mandates, but the funding doesn't come along with it, especially in the special ed area. General fund expenditures by program. 47% of our expenditures are regular instruction. Next in line is exceptional instruction, special needs at 19%, followed by site buildings and equipment at 11%. And that's run pretty consistent over the years as far as where the general fund revenues are spent. And this is by object, and I think you've probably seen this pie chart also. The key thing to look at here, salaries and wages at 65%, employee benefits at 18%. You don't need to be a math major to figure out that 83% of our general fund expenditures are in salaries and benefits. We're a service business, it's a people business, and that's what drives it. Our property tax levy, determination of the levy, comparing the 17 levy to the 18 levy, and the specific reasons and the impact on taxpayers. That's what we're working on right here. Every owner of taxable property pays property taxes for the different jurisdictions, whether city, county, school district. Each jurisdiction sets its own tax levy, often based on limits in state law, which school districts certainly have to follow. The county will send out the bills, they collect the taxes, and then they distribute the funds back to the different taxing jurisdictions. Probably 2 major payments throughout the course of the year, based on really the payments that you as a property owner pay into the county. Truth and taxation notice, those were sent out around the 15th, 20th of November. Gives a listing of all the information about your property, what the valuation is on the property, and that's an important part because that's one of the things that can certainly change. In this particular case, the valuation went up by 11% from 17 to 18. But we're not here this evening to talk about that. If the assessment discussion took place in April here in Marshall. But the truth and taxation notice, again, is part of the truth and taxation process. It's something that needs to take place to all property owners, whether it's ag land, homestead property, commercial property.
Question. We haven't gotten into the debt service. The Ag 40 bill has taken place, will be in place for this budget year, correct?
Yeah, and
Reduces our income for our building costs.
we'll talk about that very shortly. Good question. I've already mentioned all of these. There's over 30 different categories, 39 pages worth of formulas and adjustments. Levy limits are set, again, by state law or by what the voters may do, especially with operating referendums, above and beyond board approved. And here's what the process is. Really, step 6, that's where we get involved, the school board adopting the proposed levy in September, based on the limits that are set by the Minnesota Department of Education. After a public hearing, which we're doing tonight, the board adopts the final levy in December. The final levy cannot be more than the preliminary level except for amounts approved by voters. And there are a couple other exceptions. One of them might be for the Marshall School District. We have sent to the Minnesota Department of Education a request for additional funding, long-term facilities maintenance funding, for our voluntary pre-K project down in the wing by ECFE across the hall, and that's about $45,000. We have not heard back from them yet. It would take the commissioner's approval to have that placed in as part of the levy. And when we get to that point, if we get to that point, if it's approved, we'll have a visit with you folks as board members whether or not we want to pursue that for 17 pay 18, or maybe get it looked at and adjusted for 18 pay 19. But anyway, that's something that may or could change our amount by that $45,000. But I think I sent that off about 2 weeks ago and have not received any confirmation one way or another. Here again is the timeline. There are certainly a number of factors that can cause the tax bill to change, increase or decrease from year to year. The valuation, which I already mentioned, changes in the total value of all the property in the school district. If there's more entities that can share in the burden of tax, then that might decrease what you have to pay in taxes. And then the increase in levy amounts cause, or increases or decreases in state funding formulas, local needs. I'll just point this one out. Enrollment changes. When your enrollment is increasing, your levy amount is going to increase in a lot of the general fund areas. And then voter approved referendums and other factors, and that one that I just talked about with the commissioner's approval of something. What we're looking at for the levy payable in 2018 is 1.94% increase over 2017, $128,458.35. And I'm going to explain some of the major increases, decreases that we have in our levy. It really kind of goes all over the place, and you're gonna see that in here in just a minute. I had visited before about the referendum authority, $424 in local optional revenue. That's in place. The only way you wouldn't do that, you'd opt out of that. And there are no districts that are opting out of that $424. And then the $300, which you approved here in the summertime, board approved levy. And then anything over that $724 amount needs to be voter approved. I think this just interesting here, of the 331 Minnesota school districts, there are 216 with voter referendum authority in excess of the $724. Marshall is not one of them. I mentioned long-term facilities maintenance revenue. It's been a great program so far. It's additional funding. It combined a number of programs like health and safety, deferred maintenance, and alt facilities revenue programs. And for FY18, LTFM revenue for most districts increased from $292 to $380 per pupil unit. So that's a significant increase, and that's part of the reason why you'll see in another slide that our general fund amount goes up because of the long-term facilities maintenance revenue, additional dollars, and of course additional students. And it's equalized, but there comes a point in time where there isn't a whole lot of state aid that you get. It becomes more of a levy number rather than both levy and state aid. And multiple uses. We didn't use all the money that we received for 16-17. This year we're looking at probably spending almost everything that's been budgeted in regards to long-term facilities maintenance revenue and moving forward. We're looking at planning a roofing project, which we're going to use bonding through long-term facilities maintenance revenue. That would be for 18-19. So it is a good program, and it really was about time that something did happen, and a group of folks got together with Tom Melcher and worked hard with the legislature to move this forward, and we certainly want to thank all of those people for their efforts. One of the levy changes is the local optional levy going up about $30,000. Most of that can be attributed to increased enrollment. And again, this is for 17 pay 18 for the 18-19 school year. This is an increase, first-tier board-approved referendum. Before, of that and I'm talking about that $300, we had in place from voter-approved about $286, and then you had to approve the other $14 to get it up to $300. And so all that voter-approved has been moved out to board-approved referendum. So, and again, the use of funds is for general fund expenses. And as is explained below, the previous voter-approved referendum amount has been phased out up to $300 through legislative action and replaced by school board approved. And so this is on the voter-approved side. There's a change, a reduction of $361,000, but basically it's an offset. There's not really any change in revenue. It's just where it's being placed. And it's being placed rather than in voter-approved into the regular category. The student achievement levy, that came out about 5 years ago as part of the formula. It wasn't a whole lot of dollars, but there was a reason, and I can't remember what the reason was, to have that student achievement levy. Well, now that in 18-19 is being phased out by the legislature. So there's a reduction of $27,000. And as I had related to you before, long-term facilities maintenance revenue equalized and unequalized, we're going to see a $160,000 change in levy going forward from 17 to 18 because of the increased rate and, again, increased enrollment. And then the Department of Education or the legislature maybe made a little bit of a change in operating capital. We'll see a $41,000 decrease there to, in essence, partially offset the major increase in long-term facilities maintenance levy. It really doesn't offset a $160,000 increase. Here's another one of the areas that there's a decrease, the judgment levy. We levied for that 16 pay 17 for the 17-18 school year, so we're receiving that amount, $137,500. That's for a settlement from a couple years ago, but we were able to levy for it. And now for 18-19, it's gone. There's so it's a reduction really in levy. And that's a significant one. That was just a one-time deal. the major change that we see as far as an increase goes when it's all said and done is with the voter-approved debt service excess. And I looked through a number of pages to try to figure out all the formulas to arrive at this. But basically, on an annualized basis, there is a formula that the state uses as far as a typical reduction of debt service levy. Because your fund balance is maybe increasing too much, you have too much in the fund balance. And last year we had a debt service excess reduction of 200,000 plus. Okay, 200,000 plus, keep that in mind. And now this year we're only getting a reduction of $53,000. So $154,000, $155,000 reduction in the excess means additional levy. And when we come to the 128,000, the 1.9% increase, most of that, when it's all said and done, is right here with this voter-approved debt service excess. And part of that is because of our QZAB and capital bonds escrow amounts are part of that fund balance, but we can't be reducing that money because eventually we're going to have to pay for those bonds, pay those bonds off. And so all that money that's going in to the debt service fund balance, at least part of it anyway, is for this QZAB alternative and capital facilities bonds escrow account, and that's where it sits. So if we were reducing that, somewhere down the line, we wouldn't have the money to pay off those bonds when their call date is due. So there's a number of factors, but this is really the main change that is in fact taking place with our levy when it's all said and done. An actual tax impact can change from property to property. Check your truth and taxation statement. School district funds, that's general fund. That's how the general fund levy is spent. Community service fund levy, a couple items of how it is spent, and then the debt service fund levy, principal and interest, and of course OPEB and Matt's favorite implicit rate subsidy. It's part of that category. And here's the total amounts in each of the funds. $3,548,000 general fund, $183,000 $348 community service fund, and a little bit more than $3 million in the debt service fund, making a grand total of $6,761,000 and change. And here you can see what's taking place, looking at 16 pay 17 levy versus the proposed 17 pay 18, and whether it's an increase or a decrease and what that percent change. So general debt service, 161,500. If you refer back to that 155,000 on that debt excess that changed, again, that's where a great majority of our $128,000 increase from 16-17 to 17-18 is in fact taking place. Any questions on that slide? Voter approved dropped, and that was again because the referendum, which had like $286 of that $300 is voter approved. Now it's all board approved, and so that falls under other school levies, which in fact increased by $350,000. One more time on the proposed increase. The tax levy history, starting out with 02 pay 03 all the way to what's currently being proposed. The trend has been over the past probably 5 or 6 years of increases. There's been one decrease there. The rest have been increases. And I mentioned this before about changes in market value. There could be some small changes, but basically those are set, and that is a big factor, certainly for some property owners this go around. Class rates, they haven't changed. I'm using the same slide from back in pay 2012. Everything is taxed differently, whether it's apartments or residential homestead, and so on. And those have held very steady over the past 6 or 7 years. And this is just an example of in the 3 major different categories. Same property value of $200,000, but the tax rate is different. For residential homestead as compared to commercial industrial, as compared to ag homestead, and net tax capacity, that's there's quite a difference, ranging from $1,000 to $4,000. And just on a percent basis, where the proposed tax levy spending is going for 17 pay 18. Debt service at 44.8, almost 45%. General fund at 52.5%. Community services much less at 2.7%. Some information from schoolfinances.com. Just draw your attention again to that, just a little bit of history here as far as $165,000 market value property and what ag, land, and building might cost as compared to commercial industrial, as compared to residential homestead. And if you look at this bar chart, basically things haven't changed considerably, but again, it shows the trend from here to here as increasing as far as the tax levy for the school district. And the red is commercial industrial, the blue is the homestead, and the green is the farm, ag plus or home and 1 acre. And here is a comparison looking at the Marshall School District with 3 other school districts, New Ulm, Worthington, and Wilmer, and a little bit of history, starting with pay 08 for fiscal year 09 all the way up to pay 18 for fiscal year 19, which we're again talking about tonight. If everything would remain the same, someone who owns a property, market value property, homestead of $165,000. In Marshall, the amount would be $703. Wilmer, $647, that would be the lowest. Worthington at $758, and New Ulm at the highest, $820. And then right below here is, just a history of those years from pay 08 through pay 18. Bill, you had asked about the ag bond credit, passed into law in June. It's a permanent law into perpetuity, and it's appropriated from the general fund. That's where the money comes to support the 40% ag to school credit. Farm, land, and private timberland taxes will go down in 284 school districts beginning in 2018 with this year, which means over $40 million in tax relief for those type of properties. For the Marshall School District, not for the district, but for the ag land owners in the district, about a $306,000 reduction in property taxes for debt service. The savings per $500 in land value is $157. And there's a quote from our vice chair in regards to the efforts that took place to get this legislation finally passed and signed by the governor. And this ag to school credit does not show up on the tax levy limitation. It's a separate deal. And this last bullet point is important just from the standpoint that if it could have been included in the tax levy information, okay, there would have been a $178,000 or 2.7% reduction in the total tax levy for the Marshall School District for 2017 pay 2018, rather than a $128,000 increase, 1.94% increase. So that $306,000 that you see up there will be paid to the farmers from the general fund, or the general fund will be paying the school district.
That's what we're receiving as revenue.
Pardon?
That much less that we receive as revenue.
We'll receive it. It'll be coming from the state rather than the individual property tax owner.
The state's making up the difference in the ag?
Yeah. The state is making up the difference.
40 million, is that?
40 million, just roughly. Property tax refunds, there are two refund programs and a deferral program. My advice is consult your tax professional in regards to those. You can visit the Minnesota Department of Revenue website. One of them is the circuit breaker. And this is all the information regarding that, the highlights of the circuit breaker refund, special property tax refund, how that works using Form M-1PR. I have the Minnesota Department of Revenue phone number that can help you out. But again, whoever does your taxes, they're going to be aware and know these and see whether you qualify or not. Senior citizen property tax deferral. It's a deferred tax program. You still end up having to pay the taxes, but it could help you out in a time where you might have a need. And basically here is what we would ask at the December 18th meeting that you approve in regards to our proposed school tax levy. Unless there is that change, that minimal change that I talked about previously. Any comments from the public? Any comments from the school board?
Well done.
Thank you. And we won't have a subsequent hearing, and we'll look to certify the 2018 property tax levy at our meeting in 2 weeks on the 18th. Thank you for your kind attention this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lamprecht. Moving on to our public forum, which I see is empty. Anybody like to bring up any information items on MREA? Enrollment update, any questions?
If you have questions, otherwise I can go through it.
I think it's self-explanatory.
Okay, I'll make a few points about that, though. It's been a while since we've talked about our enrollment, so let's see, Tricia, if you you want to look at maybe the fourth slide, I think it is, actual funded for enrollment. Okay, that's okay. I'll go to the same one. Make sure I'm on the same page. Down one more. So just wanted to show you a little bit of a picture. And the chart was, or the table was too wide to get on one screen, if you will. So the Minnesota Department of Education has actually been providing us data and statistics on a variety of things, but student enrollment since 1999. So official figures from the Department of Ed are only available back until then. But you can see our enrollment through 2007, 2008, where it dropped off a little bit. And then if you go to the next slide, starting in 2010-11 and leading up to last year, we saw an increase in our student enrollment, which we've talked about. And we know some years we had significant increases, like in 2014-15, we had 70 students more than we did the previous year. In 2015-16, we had 137 students more than we did the previous year. So we know, and then the next slide, if you're more into the graphic type of illustrations, you can kind of see that dip, and now we have more students than we have all the way back to 1999 when the MDE was tracking enrollment. The next slide, just talk briefly about kindergarten projections, because we really have, Bruce and I and others, take a look at our own projections. We take a look at the projections that were provided to us by Hazel Reinhardt 2 different times, I think, and on a subsequent slide I'll talk a little bit more about her projection methodologies. And then also Bruce just had some graphs in his Truth in Taxation presentation from schoolfinances.com. One of their products that we subscribe to is called NPro, or Enrollment Pro, and they also provide us some projections. So one of the things with projections that is pretty key is just how many kindergartners are going to come into school each year. And when you look at Hazel Reinhardt's, her low projections, her high projection, School Finances low projection for incoming kindergarten students, and their high projections, and then how many we've actually had come in, you can see there's quite a discrepancy between the high and the low and the actual. So we spend a lot of time on that, but yet there's a lot of different models that show different things. On the next slide, I won't go through everything, but Hazel Reinhardt, I believe, was initially here in January of 2012. Does that sound right? And presented to you. Her slide said 12, but 12 or 13, and then she was back and presented in June of 2015 with basically where she affirmed her projections. You can see what she uses in terms of different factors when she takes a look at enrollment projections. And what I've used in here is I've taken her most conservative projections, which would be a combination of low kindergarten enrollment projections and low grade-to-grade migration. That's her least aggressive, and also her most aggressive, which is the highest number of kindergarten students that she thinks will be coming into the school district, or might be coming into the school district, in a high migration rate. And the next slide, this came right from her PowerPoint presentation in June of 2015, when her projections, the most aggressive method, if you will, shows us with 2,730 students in the 23-24 school year. Her least aggressive or most conservative projections show us with 2,625 students that same year. So even there, within her model, there's a little bit of a variety and some range. Next slide, again, just kind of comparison so you can see what she projected, and we've exceeded her projections. In some cases, I would say significantly, compared to her most aggressive projections. So even the first time that she presented here, we ended up with more students than what her most aggressive projection model showed. The next year, we were, again, 36 students above her most aggressive model, then 115 students above, 67 and 72. So we've outpaced her projections. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you look at her projections from 1819 to 1920. Excuse me. Transitioning a little bit to schoolfinances.com, their NPRO model, which is another one that we use. They use, I would say, many of the same things, but they have their own maybe ratios and formulas that they use, but again, very, very similar. They also bring in some different things that Ms. Reinhardt did not use. Bruce can correct me on this, but I think there's 13 different variables that you can change or something like that in NPRO, and it spits out numbers left and right at you. So I've tried to kind of give you a sense of what their conservative projections are for the future and their aggressive projections on the next slide. Again, looking forward to 2023-24. From a low conservative perspective, they're saying we'll have 2,804 students during the 23-24 school year, and their most aggressive model shows 3,055 students. So even there's a difference with, of a couple hundred students just in their methodologies. The next slide just shows you, again, kind of a comparison of Hazel Reinhardt's and school finances, and shows you the variance. And what does that say? That this is a little bit of science, a little bit of art, and a little bit of luck. But it's also the luck, I think, is based on using common sense. And in our case, we've chosen to be conservative with what I'm going to show you next. So when we project, these are some of the factors that we utilize. We really rely heavily on a historical basis, especially from 8th to 9th grade. We tend to gain, I think, about 58 students in that grade alone, 57 or 58, and that's based on a 5 or 6 year history. We take a look at how many students we have in terms of other districts that we have tuition agreements with. We contact our private parochial schools and say, hey, how many 6th graders, 7th, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we continue to be conservative, and we will. You'll see that a lot in this presentation, I know. Even though number of births in Lyon County and in the Marshall zip code have continued to increase over the last 5+ years, we're still using a conservative number of 182 incoming kindergartners, which is the average of the last 6 years. So some years we've had more than that, some years we've had less than that, but right now we've kind of settled on 182 incoming kindergartners all the way out to 2023-24. Each year, interestingly, over the last 6 years, we've gained 68 students in terms of kindergarten to 1st grade, 1st to 2nd, 2nd to 3rd, so on and so forth, all the way through 12th grade. We've had a net increase relative to grade progression of 68 students in all those grades. So that shows me that we're gaining students in different grades. You know, we might gain 3 students in 1st grade this year, 3 more this year than we had last year. However, in 6th grade, we might have 1 less than we had last year, but the net increase of that grade progression in the last 6 years is an increase of 68 students. That's a positive thing. Not a lot of districts are able to have that kind of data and discussion. So when you factor all of this in and you look to the future, and again, this is conservative, this is the lowest amount of any of the models, if you will. We're looking at the potential to have almost 2,700 students in 2023-24. That's kind of a number that we've shared for for the past few years. Again, it's conservative and based on a lot of different things. If all of a sudden, if next year we have 192 kindergartners over the course of the next 5 years, 19, 20, all the way through 23, 24, that's the potential to have many more students than what is built into here. So I do think it's a conservative model, but still that's something that we need to do. And then the next slide just sort of shows a comparison of Hazel Reinhardt low and high projections, schoolfinances.com low and high projections, and our preliminary projections. Again, I would say those are the most conservative probably of all of these, because even though the Hazel Reinhardt number in 2023-24 is less than what we're projecting, you have to remember we're already 70 or 80 students ahead of what she projected. So you kind of have to factor that in a little bit. And it would be interesting if we had her come back, what she would say now based on current enrollment, but we don't probably need to do that. Again, a graph just showing the same information if you're more into the graphic illustrations. Additional information, I talked briefly about it. We're seeing increasing birth rates in Lyon County. We, on average, capture about 50% of the students that are born in Lyon County, and about 86% of the students that are born with a 56258 zip code in Marshall. So those are good rates and just something that I found interesting. Again, different models use different variables, and we have that wide range, but we're going to continue to project conservatively. And really, I look at this, I probably spend an hour, hour and a half looking at this every month just to see what changes have taken place. So if I were to summarize, enrollment has gone up 382 students, or almost 18% in the last 9 years. We really look at all the variables, as many as we can that we understand. I think schoolfinances.com has some that we kind of scratch our head at, but yet they're valuable and built into their model. But we look at as many variables as we can. The ranges, when you look forward to the 2023-24 school year, we've got a low projection of almost a 9% increase, all the way up to a higher projection of a 21+% increase. And for the last time, I think 6th time I've said it, but we're going to keep being conservative and update as possible. And I think every year our enrollment projections, the actual student enrollment, has actually exceeded those. So just wanted to give you an update. It's been a while since we've taken a look at that, and I could certainly answer any questions that you have.
I think the data, the 382 student increase in the last 9 years is significant. And that, you know, your conservative approach, I looked at the figures before. It looks like we're going to increase by a minimum of 230 students in the next 6 years. A minimum. That's the conservative at the end, up to almost 400.
Which is scary. Scary but good.
Yeah. But using a conservative, just conservative alone, 230, that'd put us over almost 515 in a 15-year period increase of students. That's huge.
It's a big increase.
Any other comments? Thank you for the update.
Good.
That's excellent. Thanks, Scott.
A little bit shorter than Bruce's.
How do I get back?
This is any comments on our second reading, our second review of policies 506 to 513? Moving on to our action items, authorization to advertise and hire a paraprofessional position. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Bill and Bill, okay. Any questions? Hearing none, please vote. Trish, I did hit call for the vote and it didn't do anything. So did you take?
On ours.
I don't know. Did I get reprimanded again?
It's up again, to vote again. What do they vote on?
We'll do a manual vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Be honest with you, okay, we'll move on to a resolution to support the purchase and exchange of school trust lands. I have a motion.
So moved.
It's open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, please vote.
I just have a question. I'm sorry. We own $27 million worth of school property?
The way I read that, the trust owns it, and so much of that revenue goes back to the trust, and then they split that out to all the school districts. So it helps,
That's the
it
entire
helps,
state.
it helps
That's the
fund
entire
it.
state.
It helps funding for the whole state.
School trust, it's state school trust land.
Right.
Yes.
Statewide. Okay, thank you.
We get about 60,000-70,000. And
It is approved.
Who was that great candidate?
We need a action item, authorization to dispose of obsolete equipment.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Is approved. Anything else? Folks, to the cause. Okay, thank you. Meeting's over.